What's going on, everyone? This is Sheets filling in for Adam Perry today. I'm going to go over the NHL slate for this evening, talking about my process of how I would go ahead and build if, in fact, the slate we're starting now, which it is not. We'll have a little fun and screenshot here a little bit. We took down the big GPP last night solo. With a 6-point cushion with this particular lineup. I did play 50 lineups, and this is kind of what I ended up with for the winner. And this looks like a 3-man Edmonton with actually a 4-man Edmonton with a 3-man Rangers. I think it was something like that. Team view. This is interesting. I didn't realize this is what I had. Oh, it is a 4-3. Because I'd be very surprised if I didn't have something like a 4-3 or something like that. So that's what this was. This is a 4-man Edmonton and the 3-man Rangers, and it was a really good sweat as we approached the end. We needed Bobrovsky to hold off like all these Vancouver guys. Vegas guys who are slamming the puck into him. Now, again, this could be, what's the word I'm looking for? This could be results-oriented, I guess, but I find it interesting that you can get a 7% owned goalie on a short slate like that. I mean, considering how variant, I guess, goalies are. I mean, I always regarded goalies as kind of like an afterthought, just kind of like goalies as being someone you'd put in if they were cheap enough to make the rest of your lineups work. So to see any kind of goalie be sub 10% owned on a shorter slate like that, it was actually really surprising to me. But it's not like he did it on purpose. Okay, that's just an observation. Pretty much all these guys being very, very low owned. Now, again, as far as process goes, I mean, I will say that I was very Adam Perry-ish yesterday, in that I demanded nothing but 6-mans, 5 2s, and 4 3s. And I'm not even sure if I demanded 5 0s or not, or if I allowed them. So very, very interesting. Now, I did see in some of the Discord channels that people were annoyed about Columbus, but I mean, it's not like they did score four goals. And I guess the other thing I want to shout out here is I want to shout out our own D-Pope. We'll put it in here. D-Pope took down the knuckle puck, single entry, 1K for first. Very, very nice job. I mean, he's in this Discord quite a bit, and this is honestly what makes things what makes it worth it for me. This is really, really good to see. He's always a very positive influence on the community. And when he doesn't play like zillions of dollars in entries, and this is a good score. This is excellent. Single entry, 1K for first. Let's take this thing down. Very, very nice job. So there it is. So and D Pope, same thing. He said only 4-3 and up for him. And it's actually a pretty rare thing for people to do on shorter slates. A lot of people on 4 and 5 game slates are a little more lenient with what types of stacks, and it certainly makes sense to do it that way. And same thing with baseball. But I actually learned this from Adam a little bit. I mean, Adam is much more of a purist even than I was with respect to demanding high correlation even on the shorter slate, and I've been doing a little bit more of that. So as much as Adam learns from me and other people learn from me, I always like to learn from everybody, and a couple of things that Adam does specifically to hockey and baseball for that matter spilled over into my process. So and listen, hashtag whatever works, so I'm going to continue to do this. All right, let's go ahead and again, our processes are a little different, so I'm just going to go through this. So first thing I want to do is let's pull up, I guess, SaberSim to give us an idea of what the slate is going to look like. And then we're going to go into my raw projections and analyze them. And then we're going to build some lineups. So first of all, let's take a look and see how things are supposed to shake out here. All right, so it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 game slate spreading out from 7 p.m. all the way until the obvious late hammers at 10 o'clock. Columbus on a back-to-back, actually, from that after that overtime game against Edmonton. I don't know how that impacts playing time and things like that in hockey. Can't imagine it's that big of a deal, but I guess something to monitor. You have this 9:30 kind of late night game where Colorado looks to have a 4.2 implied total. So again, this is the first thing I look at, is I just get a sense for what I think is going to look good, and then I'm going to look at the projections and see what does look good, and then we're going to build to see what lineups actually result from what does look good. Okay, so right out of the gate, you see Toronto and Boston with this big total here. Now again, this is just the SaberSim implied total, not the updated projections, not the actual draft, sportsbook total. This is kind of what I go with. So 3.5 and 3, so it's a 6.5 total. That's really, really big. And in the early window, there's nothing. Oh, that's not true. I was about to say there's nothing that approaches it, but hell, Washington, Carolina, 6.2. That's pretty close. And then you have this Minnesota, San Jose with 6.8. Now that's even higher, right? Because Minnesota with the 4 team total. And then that's actually the 8 p.m. window. Then the St. Louis one is light. And then you get to the late night game with this Colorado-Anaheim game with a 7 total, 4.2 implied total for Colorado. And then these later games, 6.5, 6.5, and then 6. So this doesn't look to be a huge standout, but when you look at the individual teams, so Colorado 4.2, Minnesota 4, and then Toronto, and then Carolina. So without knowing who the players were and what their prices were, I would imagine that Colorado would be kind of ripe for a good, some good output. Followed by Minnesota, followed by Toronto, followed by Carolina. Okay, so then what I'll do is I'll go straight into the 2 different looks at the projections. First, the individual player projections, and you'll see this is what you can see on the premium site if you get the right view. And this is just listing all the players, and it's sorted by this G column, Sheets Value Score, which is kind of puts it all together into one number, so to speak. It's got the Sheets Value Score incorporates both fantasy points and points per dollar, and it just gives you a sense for who the whatever you want to call the best play is outside of ownership. And we have ownership kind of listed over here. And then K and L, you have the EV lines, even strength lines, power play lines, and these change as news comes out, as Adam has described very, very frequently. So right off the bat, what you're looking for is, again, we're just visualizing, is guys from the same team, hopefully from the same line, that are all kind of clumped together. That's kind of like the poor man's version of examining correlation, is finding dudes from the same team, from the same line, that all rate in this top quadrant here, sort of. And then you look for whatever extreme value. Now, again, as far as Sheets Value Score goes, you just have top 2 guys, McKinnon and Matthews. So these are the ones you want to look at first. But the thing is that as usually is the case with Matthews, he's very expensive. So it's hard to get all these guys in, but Nylander looks good from that Toronto line. And then if you want to go with Tavares, he's from that first power play line. So you do have 3 guys from that main Toronto power play line in this first group. So that obviously I would imagine that looked pretty good. Minnesota, McKinnon is with Makar, but boy, oh boy, this is a huge amount of salary. Is that what people cost nowadays? Like $8,300 for defenders? Seems going to be very difficult to get stuff like that in. And then you have, so I can't imagine that being a big stack, even though from a team total perspective, it seems like you'd want to again, if you just had to bet on who's going to score the most points, that's probably what you would do. Okay, we'll get to, I'm going to remember to talk about what Depop did here when we actually build, because that is definitely an option that people can avail themselves of when you're using SaberSim and the Sims and all that stuff. So it doesn't look like Toronto's going to be, Colorado's going to be that easy to get in. Toronto's, you can get in a little bit easier, but still that's going to be hard. So where is the value going to come from? Like where do we imagine the value is going to come from? And it looks to be, see again, I see 2 Carolinas together. That looks pretty decent. I see, Anaheim 2 looks pretty decent. But overall, it looks to be a very, very tight pricing slate. So like building by hand is going to be hard. But the one thing I will notice is this is something you can always look at is when you have these standout cheapos in here. So Jimmy Snuggerud, I guess. He has a very good Cheats value score with 3,300 salary, as does Victor Arvidsson. So no surprise that they're projected to be the 2 highest owned skaters, with the exception of Dvorsky, who's also cheap. So these value pieces are probably going to be important. So how are they going to be important? And again, we'll think about this when we actually build. But let's look at Arvidsson for a second. So one thing I will notice is he's on the first power play line. And I remember that Pasternak is on the first power play line and he's rated well. So maybe that's the way he comes in. And then Snuggerud, unfortunately, there's no real good. Oh, but Snuggerud and Dabrowski. Oh, so it's line 3, but power play 1. Okay, so this is going to be, obviously something you're going to want to do if you were building by hand, is try to avail yourself of this St. Louis power play stack, just because you have a 3,300 guy and then a 2,700 guy, both from the same power play line. So I think I would imagine that would kind of show up. Now, another way to look at this is from the stacks view, and this is available on the site too. And we rate the teams 3 different ways, either by raw points, so like for example by column B, which basically just takes the top 5 players from raw fantasy points that are on the same line and ranks them. So the top overall fantasy point, points producing 5-man line or 5-man line EV, EV or power play is going to be Colorado. Okay, and there's a pretty decent drop to the other guys. Then Toronto, Minnesota, Dallas, then a drop to Winnipeg. Then on the other extreme, you look at it in terms of column E, which is value stack. So what this does is it just rates everything by point per dollar. So the top 5 point per dollar plays that are on the same line. And as you can see, as we talked about before, these St. Louis guys are very, very cheap. So these are going to be the best point per dollar plays. And then after that, Boston, San Jose, Montreal. Now the column that I like to expect the most out of is this modified stack one. So that's H. And what this does is actually takes the 5 guys with the best sheets value score and make sure they're on the same line and and ranks those. So here you have Colorado again, followed by Toronto, Minnesota. So what you would expect is that you'd want to see some of this stuff like Colorado, Toronto, Minnesota. But as I mentioned, Colorado might be kind of tough to get to as far as price goes. And then Toronto, because they were easy to get to, you can say that their probably might be too high owned. So if I were going to, let's just say I was not going to use SaberSim, I just wanted to advise something based on this sheet, I would say that what you'd want to do is play the Minnesota, because it's a little lower owned, you know, but still rates pretty well. And then maybe use some of those cheapo values that we talked about. So you want to see what that would look like? I mean, just for the hell of it. I mean, let's actually pull this up. Let's look at a lineup and see if we can't build that. And then we'll go ahead and use SaberSim to really figure out what we want to do. So let's see what that looks like. So again, we would look to see what we have. So Zuccarello, and again, I wanted to make sure we get them all. So Zuccarello, Kaprizov, Spurgeon, Eck, and Boldy. Let's see if we can play all those guys. So Minnesota, Eck, Kaprizov, Boldy, Zuccarello, and then Spurgeon. So now you'd have 4,100 a man. And remember, you have those two cheapos that we talked about before. I think they were both coming from the St. Louis. So I think we know what we're headed here, right? So you want to play both that, who was the center that we had? The Dvorsky, and then one of the wings was, what was the, let me see what that other St. Louis guy was. 1 second. Again, I just don't remember. Snuggerud, right? So Snuggerud here. So now you could play this, I mean, pretty easily. You know, you could put in your goalie of choice and then fill in your defenseman of choice. And I think this is probably a good approach to a nice single entry lineup. You know, because it does give you a little bit of ownership fade, and you can get them in pretty comfortably, and you can avail yourself of these two cheapos that are probably going to be very popular. But okay. Or if you didn't want to do it that way, you could play that Boston dude who was who? That was, let me just make sure, remind ourselves of this. Arvidsson, right? Arvidsson. It reminds me of that scene from Moneyball. Eckerton. So you could do that, either one, and then your defenseman of choice followed by your goalie, and you could put that together really easily. But let's see what SaberSim actually gives us. So so this is what you need to do. First of all, what I did was I uploaded my lineups into my contest, and similar to yesterday, what I usually do here is I'll play one in the top shelf, one in the blue line, and then 50 in the MME. And then what that allows you to do, again, it preloads the contest fields if you want to use them. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to just do like normal. So we're going to upload the projection. Now, again, if you're on TrueDFS, you can get to SaberSim through our interface and not have to do this. And my projections are probably going to be preloaded for you if you wanted to use them. But here, I'm just going to replace SaberSims with my own, just kind of do it. And then, as I mentioned before, we're going to limit our stack exposure. We're going to use 6s, 5 2s, and 4 3s. And then we'll build a full 20,000 lineup set with no other restrictions, just to kind of get things going. Now, again, not everybody has access to 20,000, so maybe I should redo it for 5,000, but it doesn't matter. So you guys, if you have access to 5,000, build 5,000. If you have access to 500, build 500. But what it's doing is it's giving you a base of lineups to choose from. But as Depot mentioned, there's other things you could do with this lineup set other than just play the top rated guys from it. We'll get there in a moment. There's Eagles. What's happening? Yeah, I'm going to be away for a little while starting Thursday, so I want to get as much much stuff in as I can. I'll poke my head in the Discord, but it's going to be a difficult run to get content up there for probably about 11 days. Now, again, just in case you don't know, I mean, obviously make sure that your goalies are in. Whenever you have the check mark here, it's when the goalies are confirmed. That's funny because, like in the NBA, you have the check mark when they're starters. Oh yeah, Eagle, we took it down last night. I had it up here before, but we won the overload in the hockey for 10,000. So yeah, it was very, very nice. Nice sweat at the end too. I needed Florida to hold off Vegas for the last like 7 minutes. So there was a lot of shots, a lot of variance, pulled the goalie and all of it, and we held them off at the end. So it's good. Made up for the NFL showdown and NBA and then some. Okay. All right, so what I have to do is I have to use templates here for a second. This way it'll sim against the right lineups and all that stuff. Okay, so let's do templates, 1 group per contest. That's what I like there. And what it's doing now is we're just going to run the sims, and we're going to run the sims against the pre-filled lineups that SaberSim thinks people are going to play, and that's usually where you're supposed to start. Okay. And another way you can do this, which D Pope was successful with last night, was that he created the lineups like I just did, but then instead of using the SaberSim predetermined fields to compare his lineups to, he actually used that exact field that he created, like his lineups. He said, you know what, this is what the field is going to do. And then what he did, so then when you do that and you run your lineups against that field, you're basically simming it against yourself, and it usually provides a very different results. Now you do that usually when you have a lot of faith in your ownership projections, among other things. So okay, so let's right now we're in portfolio diversification mode. We're in everything pretty normal. And we'll just save this to all, and then we will go ahead and see what we actually got. I like to save it before looking at what I have. This way, at least I know that something is in here. Okay. All right, so now let's go back and see what we got. First of all, as far as stack exposure, we got 55% 4-3s, 32% 5-2s, 11% 6s. That's nice. As far as team stacks go, not surprising, St. Louis, right? Because of those 2 bits of value. But then after that, I mean, where's my Minnesota? Only 13%. As a matter of fact, that the next highest owned was Seattle, like a team that I didn't even consider at all. And when you do SaberSim enough, you'll and for all the different sports, this is not going to be surprising to you. Like hockey, you just SaberSim and technology helps with hockey a lot more than some of the other sports. I mean, to be able to figure out all the correlation between all these lines and all these line mates is very difficult to do as a human being. Like I was able to listen, I ran projections and I said, okay, this is what these guys are supposed to score, but it doesn't exactly work that way, especially when we consider different ranges of outcomes. So that's why I really do like to use SaberSim for hockey and kind of embrace this idea that we're getting some weirdness. Now, as far as identify what the top 6-man stacks are, I mean, not too many anyway. Boston, Calgary, Montreal. And as far as 4-mans, this is where you're getting the majority of the St. Louis and Seattle stuff. And without even looking, I can tell you that, you know, those two cheapos from St. Louis is probably in a lot of this. So very interesting type build. Now, what I want to do next is what I suggested, what D Pope did last night. So now, instead of specifically the overload, instead of using the field lineups to be this flagship MME, which Saberson has preordained, instead we'll go into builds and we'll call this build 2. Well, it's called build 2. So what it's going to do now is it's going to sim everything against that build. So if it's doing this correctly, I imagine that it's going to be a very different type of construction. So let's take a look. I like to see like the delta depot, the difference between like what one build looks like with one set of settings versus what one build looks like, what another build looks like with a different set of settings. As I've stressed before, the answer to that question is very sport dependent. Like basketball, there's not too much of a difference, really. I mean, there's a difference, but it's not crazy. But with really high correlative sports like baseball and hockey, it can be really nasty. I mean, the difference, though, the width of the difference can be really nasty. Okay. So now, if I had to take a look at the team stacks, I would actually be getting 21% Minnesota as the highest own, which was what I was suggesting a little bit earlier. Seattle, though, still is showing up as a very, very strong play. So very interesting. You know what I'm not getting any of is St. Louis. How funny is that? Like no, actually that's not true. I'm getting 17%. So the difference isn't actually as dramatic as I thought it was, but it does bring Minnesota up to the top, which is an interesting thing. That's pretty much all I have. I mean, this is all that I do, you know, and then, you know, at 7:50 if I'm around, you know, I'll late swap. You know, and then at 9 o'clock, I'll late swap. Yeah, I'm going to play MMA this weekend. I'm going to be away, but I'm going to definitely put some lineups in. It's you know, obviously it's an amazing card, and it's actually at Madison Square Garden, but I'm not going to be around for it. But sure, you know, and I will put out an MMA video before I get out of here, probably tomorrow. But yeah, tremendous card. Okay, I guess that's pretty much all I have. I'm going to do an NBA thing at 1. And then when I go live with Bobby, if I remember, I'll touch on any changes in hockey. But aside from that, that's pretty much all I have.